Welcome to Rock Your Reinvention, the show for high-achieving career women who refuse to settle for mediocrity and aren't afraid to take bold action. This is a place where you can authentically show up, where every dream and goal can be validated and achieved. Hi, I'm your host, Karen Freeland, a certified life reinvention coach, speaker, and award-winning author. I'm here to give you the tips, tools, and strategies to help you shift your mindset, build your confidence, and take meaningful actions so you can rock your reinvention. Ready to go from stuck to thriving? Let's go. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Rock Your Reinvention. I am super excited for today's guest. She is a new friend. We just met back in January at PodFest, which is the place to be if you're a podcaster. So it won't surprise you that that's among one of her many talents. But we just started chatting. We both realized we had reinvention stories. She had me on her show, which we'll tell you about in a minute. And now I am super excited to reciprocate and share her journey with all of you. So without any more delay, please welcome to the show, Julie Rose.
Hi, Karen. Thank you so much for having me. And this is actually really fun for me to be on this side. I haven't really talked much about this story, these stories we're going to discuss here. I don't think a lot of top of mind listeners actually know the whole story because it just doesn't come up. So yeah, this is a fun treat for me.
This is like a Rock Your Reinvention exclusive. So you're getting exclusive content here. Cool. Well, before we go on, why don't you just take a moment to tell people who you are, what you do, and then we'll jump into your reinvention story.
Okay. So I am a radio journalist. Well, I guess I need to stop saying radio because now we're podcast. I'm a journalist, mostly audio, I guess is what I'm an audio storyteller, whatever. I've been in this business for 20 years. I host a podcast called Top of Mind with Julie Rose, which actually I only started doing 2 years ago. Before that, our show was a daily live radio show for 7 years. Every afternoon for 2 hours during drive time on Sirius XM satellite radio, the BYU radio channel. That's our network, BYU Radio. I was doing interviews 2 hours a day live on the radio. Anything can happen. It was a lot of work, really exciting. I did like 10,000 interviews in those 7 years. So I can't remember even half of the ones that I did. But and before that, I was reporting at public radio stations in Salt Lake City and in North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina. Did a lot of contributing to some of the big flagship programs that people might recognize, like Morning Edition, All Things Considered. So the public radio chapter of my life lasted about 10 years. And before that, I had another brief career before my reinvention. So I guess that's part of what we'll talk about.
Yeah, I love that. And so tell me about live radio, because I obviously have not really done radio. I've just started getting into the news a bit, and that's been really fascinating to learn how that all works and behind the scenes. Yeah. Totally not the way I thought it was all run. But did you it's a live show. So could you take vacations? Like how did you navigate that with your personal life?
It was tough. I mean, I had a backup host.
Okay.
And so she would fill in occasionally. And it got to the point where she was actually doing one of the 6 interviews. Most days I'd be able to hand off something, because the real thing with the live radio is that I had 15 minutes with a guest, and like I've never said a word to this person before. Hey, welcome to Top of Mind, right? Live on the radio. And so I don't have a lot of time to waste trying to figure out what the interesting piece of their story is. So the amount of prep that was required in advance, a 15-minute interview would take me easily an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, if not more. If they wrote a book, I'd have to read the whole book. So, there was a ton of prep involved just to be able to kind of know what they had to say that was going to be most interesting, so that I could really draw that out of them and help them to shine in that brief period where they're kind of panicked because live radio is terrifying for everybody. And I'm thinking of the listener who's like, move on, get to something interesting. This is boring. I'm going to change the channel, right? So that was the real big challenge. But then, yes, I had a backup host, and then occasionally we would sort of pre-package something if it was a holiday. And, and we knew that there just weren't a lot of live radio listeners. Nobody was commuting to work on Christmas Day. Like, we weren't going to be live on the radio on Christmas Day. Now, that's different back in the in my public radio days, there was no such thing as a day off. Somebody had to be working. And so I did my fair share of early Christmas mornings, hosting the morning show or, covering on Thanksgiving afternoon, those kinds of things. We just had to rotate. Somebody had to work. The news never stops, as they say.
That's right. Oh, that's so cool. Thanks for sharing. I was so curious about that when you were talking.
Yeah, it's actually thrilling and addicting and also really runs people down. I mean, there's a reason that a lot of journalists just kind of burn out,
Yeah, I know. And I'm no stranger to corporate burnout. So I think that the burnout is real regardless sometimes of the industry, but it's just, we're set up that way. I think, especially in America, just to like, go, 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 always be on, always come up with the next big thing. Like do.
And then on the news consumer side, I mean, think of the times when it's a holiday and you're bored and you turn on, whatever cable news channel you like to watch and you expect there to be something entertaining and fresh and not just reruns of whatever game show,
Sure.
It's like we not only do we do it to ourselves, but we expect it of everyone else. I have to catch myself sometimes when I'm like, why aren't they open on Thanksgiving night at 6:00 when I want to go through and get my soda, right? Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, how dare my favorite fast food restaurant be closed on a holiday? But
right.
I mean, yeah. It's a pretty crazy environment that we've built for ourselves here in America.
Oh, it sure is. And you know what? I forgot to ask you too. Do you have a fun fact about yourself, like something nobody really knows that you want to share? Sorry, I didn't mean to spring that on you, but
A fun fact. I don't know. Some people know this. People in my immediate circle know this, but I bore so easily and I dislike exercise so much that I have mastered the art of walking on my treadmill uphill at a pretty brisk pace while also knitting and watching TV. So that's my standard decompression hour. I come home from work, I turn on an episode of Madam Secretary is what I'm watching right now, and I knit while walking uphill at a pace where I don't fall off. But one of these days, if you see podcast host impales herself in in home exercise accident, you'll know what happened.
Fair enough. We'll be like, oh, that must be Julie.
Yeah, that would be the knitting needles.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, be careful, but that sounds amazing. And maybe we've got a new Olympic sport on our hands. I don't know. We'll see.
Somebody
tell the Olympics. Amazing. All right, so let's go back to this moment in your career. Something was going on and you were like, I need to reinvent myself. And you, I guess, jump into radio. I guess if we go way back to the first reinvention. So tell us what was going on at that moment in your life.
So I studied public relations in college. Mm-hmm. In my heart, journalism was always what I was going to do, but for some not very good reasons in hindsight, I chose public relations mostly out of fear. I was afraid of the deadlines and that I wouldn't be good at journalism, that I wouldn't be able to balance it with a family, kind of all those things. It was a lot of fear. I chose public relations, which seemed easier to manage. Loved the program. It was a great program, actually, at my school. Graduated and started working in PR and I was good at it. And I really enjoyed the people I worked with, first career, out in the world, experiences. And about 5 years into that, I moved back to Utah and I needed to, long story short, I ended up working as both a fundraiser and doing public relations at a nonprofit. And so again, I'm 6-7 years into it. I have a mortgage. I've purchased my first condo. I'm starting to be an adult and kind of do all those things in my mid to late 20s. And but I really didn't enjoy it. It was just not, it was, I kind of started to think, gosh, adulting is the worst. I'm sitting here watching the clock. When is 5 o'clock going to come so I can start living my life? I'm here. I'm work to pay the bills. It's not painful. It's an office job. I'm lucky in that way. I can afford my life, but this is I got to do this for the next 60 years? This sounds awful. But I thought that was just it. I thought that's what grownups do. And at the same time, I had become fascinated with public radio, storytelling. I had started listening. I didn't have TV, couldn't afford cable. It was listening to the radio as my entertainment. And I I started to feel like, God, that I'd really like to, that's so fun. I bet I could do that. I had listened so much that I thought that would be like a fun hobby. So this was before YouTube. It was before you could sort of go online and learn anything, right? I started just kind of looking around, talking to people who knew people, and found that one of my friends in my church congregation, her sister was the news director at a local public radio station. And I was like, could you introduce me? And so I waltz in there with my little mini disc recorder, which is like pre-digital, that I purchased on half.com, which was the previous to eBay. And my little microphone. And I was like, this seems fun. Can I, will you guys teach me something? I'll do it for free. I just really want to learn. And to their credit, they said, well, sure, we don't have a lot of time or resources, but we also don't have anyone, can't afford anyone. So, I mean, if you want to try, go for it. You're welcome to use our facilities after hours.
That's so cool.
And if you produce something worthwhile, maybe we'll put it on the air. And I was like, great, that sounds great. So that was it. But the moment that I knew, so what happened was I started doing after hours. Like, I still had to pay my mortgage. I couldn't quit my job. I never in a million years thought this was going to be my real thing. But I just started like going to city council meetings after hours and just making things up. But I will tell you, the night that I took my little mini disc recorder to the state fair after a long day at work, and I recorded a bunch of audio of animal sounds and kids and things frying in the deep fryer and just, your typical state fair sounds. And I came back and spent the entire night in the empty radio studio experimenting. I had no idea how to turn this into a story, but I knew what I wanted it to sound like. And so I mean, the way I did it was so wonky in hindsight, but I was like experimenting and trying to make things work. And then the next day, the news director was like, hey, that was a good piece. Good job. Nice, nice audio storytelling. And I was like, really? How can I do more of this? Like, I can't. Can this be more than I'm living for these long nights where I'm getting no sleep and I just can't get enough of this creative thing? Can I do that? So that's when I started hoping that maybe I could make a shift.
I love that. I mean, one thing that you said too earlier was when you were in PR, like you were good at it. And I think for so many of us who want to make a change, it's really hard because we are good at our jobs. We could probably do our jobs with one eye closed and an arm tied behind our back. And it's like, okay, well, why would I go through the pain of learning something else? And then you answer that question by saying, like, how can I do more of this, right? Like, you were so fired up and so fueled and had this passion for journalism that it's like, I'll do this at any cost, even for free. And I think for those who are listening that have been feeling stuck or aren't sure about the move to make, like, look for those moments where you're so pumped up, you're so energized by what you're doing, and find ways to have more of that in your life.
Exactly. And I wasn't at that point. It became this like, oh, maybe, how cool would that be? But, oh, come on, realistically, I have I can't go back to journalism school. I can't, that seemed like too much of a lift. I had a mortgage. What was I going to do?
Right.
And, I can't just quit my day job, and I don't really have the credentials to get hired by anybody right now. So I just didn't see a path forward. And this is where the next, I was in the right place at the right time. There was a lot of luck involved, but also, I had a boss once who said, look, in this business, you make your luck. You gotta, you work hard, be in the places where the lucky things can happen, and then luck can happen to you. So, and that's true when you're like covering an important story. It can be true, in a lot of ways in life anyway. So yes, I was lucky, but also I was doing a lot of things to try to have a lucky break. And after about a year of just sort of like loving this after hours free internship hobby thing that I was developing, the station manager at this little station in Salt Lake City called me up and she said, I can see that you're really passionate about this and I know you really want to get into this. I'm going to offer you your chance right now. And then she offered me the office manager job. And I was like, ooh. And she's like, oh, and also we can only pay you X, which was like half of what I was making at my little nonprofit job. And I'm like, I don't want to be like answering the phones, ordering office supplies. Really? And she said, I know, but we will let you do one story a week as the office manager. This is your chance, she said.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not going to say yes because I thought there's just no way I can make this work financially. And then I thought, well, hang on. Maybe I can. Like I could do a little bit of freelance on the side and I have a little bit of savings. And here's where the privilege kicks in. I happened to, at that point in my life, I hadn't gotten married, which I had thought I would, but I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. So there wasn't anyone else that was going to be affected by this decision. And I thought, it's probably now or never. She's probably right about that. And I mean, I have a really supportive family. If I fall on my face and have to foreclose on my house or whatever, like I'm not going to be on the street.
Right.
So I went for it. And wouldn't you know, and of course, it was the kind of thing where I was living for that one story a week and the rest of the week I was just sort of putting on a smiley face and doing office manager stuff and kind of watching my bank account empty out. Couple months into it, they were coming right up to a point where the legislative session was getting underway. They really needed a full-time reporter to go be there to cover that. That was like part of what the station's identity was built around. And their one full-time reporter who they'd had for years and years and years and years, who was very good and very experienced, had a terrible family tragedy and like went on bereavement leave. I mean, it was one of those really, really awful, like murder, suicide kind of things in her family. And they were like, we don't know when she's coming back, but we need somebody right now. Nobody's going to come work for us part-time. Like we don't have time to do a job search. The legislative session starts in 4 days. And I was like, maybe like,
hello, right in front of you. Yep.
Can I try? Like, I can keep ordering the office stuff on the back, like on the side if you need me to. Like, I'll work extra hours. You don't have to pay me more. Like, I don't care. Let me go do that. And that was it.
Wow.
The full-time reporter never did come back. I became the full-time reporter, stayed there for a couple of years, had enough under my belt that I could go get another job, start getting onto NPR's big flagship shows, move to a bigger market, never looked back.
That's amazing. And all because you had that faith and you took that leap and said yes. I mean, think about that. That's really powerful. How many people right now are passing up their yes because of fear and because of excuse and after excuse? And I really appreciated what you said about being single. Okay. That wasn't how you saw things going for you, but that was the boat you found yourself in. And so for all the single women out there who keep saying to me, Karen, I don't have a husband to fall back on. I can't make this leap. I'm not like you, Karen. I don't have someone else to pick up the baggage. Other people who don't have partners are making leaps. Okay. So, but that's our fear, right? Talking that. It's not really it's an excuse, it's not fact.
I mean, for me, I saw it as like the greatest blessing in that moment. That decision would have been so much harder if I had to worry about, other people who needed my income at that moment. Because I figured, I can tighten my belt. I don't let's give it a shot. I can live in my parents' guest room if I have to. If this really falls flat, I don't have to drag a whole family with me into that environment, or have it cause stress on a relationship. So in that moment, I don't know how I would have been able to make that choice.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really great perspective that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about. So I'm really glad you brought that to the show. And now, speaking of your parents, there was a time where they were, just from when you and I were talking at PodFest, where they were not well and you had made the difficult decision to move back home. But I think you were offered kind of like a dream job or things were going well at work. I mean, talk to us about this pivotal moment in your career.
Yeah, well, so after I'd been in public radio for about 10 years, I had spent several years in Salt Lake City. Then I had relocated to North Carolina, Charlotte, and that was the dream job for me. I mean, I loved it. I loved the stories. I loved the environment. I loved the opportunities I was getting to be on the network. I was getting more and more, I was becoming more and more high profile. People in positions of power within the NPR network knew me, knew my work. I had reached a moment where if I wanted to make a significant jump into the big leagues, it was as good a chance as I had to that point in my life and might ever have, in terms of like the relationships I had and everything, and my resume. And so I had just finished 6 years in North Carolina, and it was the longest I'd ever been in a single employer, and I wasn't done yet. I was loving it. It really was. I could not think of another thing I would rather be doing. Like for the first time in my life, there was no other I wish or if only, except for if my family were closer, because everybody was still back in the West, in Utah. And I was like, oh, I wish my family were closer. But in terms of career, it doesn't get better. There's nothing I want more than this. And I told my boss, I'm like, I'm really happy here. I'm not looking for another job. Like I could see myself staying another 5, 6, 7 years. Like who knows, I'm here. I make a trip home over a holiday to see my family and kind of had the difficult realization that things were rougher with my parents, with their health, with their abilities than I had realized from a distance. And I asked my siblings, I'm like, is this unusual? No. I mean, I think a lot of people know what this feels like. If you're not there all the time, you come back and you're like, oh gosh, this seems like you've really declined. My siblings were like, no, actually, this was a good day. I was like, oh no, things are happening faster than I thought. And in the back of my mind, I had always just known that when the time came that my parents would need help, I wanted to be able to do that for them. Mm-hmm. I'm not the only one that could do it. I have 4 siblings who are all very supportive and engaged, but I'm the oldest. I'm the only one that was still single. And it was part of the story I had always told about sort of why my life was turning out the way it was, because this was a thing that I would be able to do for them. And I wanted to be able to do that for them. So, I had to walk back into my boss's office like 4 days later after that vacation and be like, so by the way, I think I got to go. I'm leaving. The thing that surprised me about it was that there was no second guessing. Like I came back from that vacation really troubled, really like, oh gosh, they need help now. And then I woke up like 2 days later and I just knew like the burden had lifted. The light was there. I got to go now. I got to go now. I got to leave my dream job. I have no idea what I'm going to do for a career. This could very well be career suicide. Mm-hmm. I'm leaving at the peak of my opportunities. And I'm, in my 30s at this point. Yeah. What am I doing? A lot of people are like, I could never make that choice, man. That's so brave of you. And what was surprising to me was that for someone who is so driven by fear in so many ways in her life, like this was not one of those moments. I just knew. So I did. I left. That was 10 years ago. I picked up and I left. And here's the follow-up to that, Karen, which is that, I kind of thought maybe my radio career was over. Like maybe I'd have to just go work back in PR again. And I felt like, all right, well, I'm willing to pay that price because I'll be there for my parents. Well, I'm so glad that I went when I went, because it really wasn't that much longer that my parents had to live. Mm-hmm. We didn't know that, but it wasn't long before my father passed away. And then my mother began to need a lot more care. And so I was able to be one of her real primary caregivers for the last 5, 6 years of her life until she passed away a year and a half ago. So this was time that I never would have been able to reclaim. And I know, and I had already spent those 7 years here kind of back among my siblings to build adult relationships that have been so important as I've weathered the grief of losing my parents, So yeah, it was absolutely the right move to make. Personally, I had no idea what it was going to mean for my career.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, here you are, you're still doing something that you love to this day. And I think it's just a great reminder for people that sometimes we have to make seemingly tough choices, right? But when it's the right choice, so many times you will have that peace about it. You'll have that. God, that's kind of how I was when I left corporate. It was like, I know this is scary. I know we're taking a lot of bets right now, but like, it just feels so good. I want to go in this direction. And you just know, you trust your intuition.
Yeah. There's a spiritual component for me too. I mean, I sort of felt like there have been moments in my life where, I'm a woman of faith. I do believe that there's I have a purpose here and that, my life has value and I have a mission to accomplish. I can do good in the world. And so I received I feel most confident when I feel like there's sort of a spiritual confirmation that I'm getting a message from God. Like, yes, this will work out for you. Go do that.
Oh, amen. Preach it. I'm really big spiritually myself, and I don't even probably talk about my faith as much as I'd like to because I'm always like,
Mm.
oh, is it going to turn people off? Are they going to be scared? But I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe more of us can just be brave and speak our truth, and other people will then feel comfortable to speak their truth and not shy away from their faith or their spirituality. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Absolutely. Thanks for letting me.
Of course. Yeah, we want to create a safe space for everybody. So, talk to me about fear because it's come up a little bit in this conversation, and I just see it from some of my clients when they first come to me, and other women when I talk to them. They're just like, I don't know, this feels scary. I'm not sure about making a change, and I'm sure you had several fears, and
Mm.
career suicide being one of them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
how did you overcome those fears when you were facing them?
Well, look, I'm not gonna claim to be some Zen master or anything. 'Cause
Fair enough.
I mean, I'm clinically anxious, long time medicated for anxiety person with really high expectations, a strong perfectionist streak, and
Mm.
fundamentally for me, the fear is always about not being able to see or control the outcome. I mean, I could tell you like the minute I start telling you all of my repetitive nightmares that I have, like
Mm.
you can see the pattern. It's always environments, things where I'm just out of control. Things are not
Yeah.
within my control. So I know this about myself. And so for me, the biggest fears I was dealing with, first of all, that I was torpedoing my career right at the moment where things that mattered most. I had real strong imposter syndrome because,
Mhm.
I really struggled to be comfortable calling myself a journalist. I didn't go to J school. Like I don't, I learned everything on the fly. Like I taught myself half the stuff I knew, the first 3 years I was just making it up based on what I was hearing other people do. Like I felt like I
Right.
didn't have a lot of fundamentals and I made a lot of embarrassing mistakes in hindsight. So I struggled to just sort of own that, yeah, I'm this and I can do that. Of course, when I came to BYU Radio and started doing daily live radio, that was not what I'd been doing in public radio at all. And I was like, sure, for me, a lot of it is fake it till you make it. Right. So
Yes.
I think a big part of it is I knew I was afraid. I could see that I was afraid that I wasn't going to succeed
Yep.
fundamentally. But I also have to look at the fact that I've never fallen on my face so spectacularly that I couldn't get up from it.
Yeah.
And the pattern that I had to keep looking back at was, all right, you don't know how to host a daily live radio show, but you didn't know how to do an audio package either when you spent that night
Right.
at the state fair, and you didn't know how to do an investigative story until you did it, in North
Yes.
Carolina. Like you'll figure it out, plenty of other people out there are just winging it too, and as long as you are willing to work hard and be humble, when you make mistakes, like you'll be okay.
Oh my goodness.
And
Yes.
yeah, so it's maybe just that.
Looking back and just going like, okay, I mean, I used to do this in corporate all the time. I'm like, I didn't know how to do marketing before my first marketing job. I didn't know how to be a corporate trainer before my first trainer job. Like everything is figure outable. Like we're
Yeah.
intelligent, amazing human beings. Like we
Yeah.
got this.
Yeah, people are out there willing to help. I can ask for help if I need to.
Yeah.
I don't have to be perfect on the first try. Like those are some of the repetitive lines that my father was a therapist and I was a very, like I said, anxious child, perfectionist. And so he had, all these lines that he was repeating to me that I had to repeat as a child kept coming back. Like, look,
Yep.
it's okay to ask for help and nobody expects you to be perfect. And,
Right.
if you make a mistake, you can learn from it. Just
Yeah.
don't take it so seriously. It's, I'm not even like, maybe it would be different if I was like a brain surgeon or something, but I mean, it's
But
just
we're not,
radio.
so it's fine. Exactly. Yeah, no big deal. It's just podcasting. It's fine.
Yeah,
It's why we
exactly.
hire editors and they can fix it and make it sound amazing.
Yeah.
And it was funny that you mentioned fake it till you make it too, because I'm holding it up for you, obviously. But that is one of the tips in my book, Grab Life by the Dreams. I talk about when you're building your confidence that a great way to do it is to fake it till you make it, because your brain literally does not know the difference between you telling it something that isn't necessarily true yet and it actually being true. So you can like feed that to your brain and get your brain working for you, and you'll get over your fears faster, and then you won't be faking it anymore. So it's
Exactly. It's so
actually
weird how
sound advice.
you wake up one day and you're like, I actually know how to do this.
Yeah.
Oh, I've kind of actually mastered this.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen? Like when, and it's just, I just kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it and trying to get better. And then all of a sudden I was like, man, I'm really good at this.
Yeah. So what drew you to podcasting?
Well, the truth is that I didn't pick it. I was doing live radio and had sort of finally felt like I was really good at that. And then our management said, okay, live radio is old, it was over. I mean, people are still listening, but podcasting's where it's at. So try this, reinvent yourself, which then brought with it a whole new raft of insecurities and fears and challenges that have been really exhilarating, but also, I mean, I'm still in it, Karen, because we've been doing the podcast for 2 years now, and it is so different from just radio journalism. And the hardest thing for me has been figuring out, well, podcasting required me to break one of the rules that I had made for myself that helped me to feel like I was a legit journalist. I had all of this. It's so interesting in hindsight. Like I had this whole, I'm not a journalist. I didn't really go to journalism school. Like I can't really call myself a journalist, but I could always stand. So I'm like, I may not be a, Woodward and Bernstein. Like I don't know a lot of that stuff. I don't know how to get like, deep throat sources in the State Department or whatever. But what I can do is tell a really good story and get out of the way. And that was my identity as a journalist, was I can find a story, I can listen really well, I can ask good questions, draw the brilliance out of an individual and be the conduit for them to be able to get their story out. That was my identity as a journalist. Well, all of a sudden in podcasting, the host has to be an important part of the podcast. People kept telling me, people come for the guests, but they stay for the host, right? Like you matter. You have to be part of the story. And I'm like, no, that's not the kind of journalist I am. Like, I'm not, I don't want to be part of the story. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say. How can that's a rule I won't break.
Right.
And, I'm still working on it. It's taken some time to figure out how much of myself I can put in without and still feel like I can call myself a conduit, and trying to figure out how much of that rule I need to hang on to, or did I just make it up to make myself feel good?
Oh, I love that little insight. Like maybe it was just there to protect you, oh, well, if I don't really have to get involved in the story and I set up this confine for myself where I am just the conduit, then it's okay that I didn't go to journalist school because I'm not really being a journalist or something. You know what I mean? It's like our brains, we concoct these things.
What I'm starting to realize, the little insight that's beginning to ping for me now, is that part of it was protecting myself from having to think too deeply about the issue itself that I was reporting on. Like I could keep a little bit of distance and therefore not have to really grapple with the topic itself in a personal way and figure out what it meant for me. Like I could put up this wall and I don't have an opinion on this. The reality is a lot of times I haven't had an opinion on the topic because I haven't really worked to develop one.
Right.
And by just staying distant from it, I sort of made it so I could feel okay not doing the work. Now I'm having to do the work more to figure it out for myself, which is better for me. It makes me a better person, a better contributor. And the whole goal of our podcast is to help people become better citizens, kinder neighbors, and more effective advocates. So it would be pretty hypocritical of me to not be engaging in that work as well.
Right.
So it's been a good journey for me. I'm still on it.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating because I think to some degree as a journalist, I mean, you probably do need to detach yourself from the story. I was doing my news segment back in February, and she's like, we have a little breaking news we're going to alert beforehand. And it's like, oh, there was a 3-person stabbing at the bookstore. And I'm like, okay. And then she's just like, all right, Karen, we're ready for some self-love tips. And I'm like, here we go.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, wow, you really do have to be so professional and just, switch on a dime from story to story. And I mean, it's a talent I really admire in people. So that's really interesting that you shared that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
absolutely.
Julie, I could talk to you all day long. Tell us a little bit about your podcast. Why should people come listen to Top of Mind? What do you talk about? Just share your love with the listeners.
Sure. So the quick explanation is that we are a podcast. The other realization I didn't tell you about was that a couple of years ago, here I was this, journalist, right? Finally comfortable calling myself a journalist, and I needed to be following the news. And all of a sudden, I just was burnt out. I could not think of following the news anymore. And I just, I'm like, how can I, maybe I can't be a journalist anymore because the news is just it felt depressing and it felt divisive and it was bringing me down. And I'm like, this is not good for my mental health, but what am I going to do? It's my job. So we created Top of Mind for people like me, anxious people who are turned off by how frustrated and angry the news can feel to them, how depressing, but also don't feel good just burying their heads in the sand or putting up that wall like I was doing and being like, well, that's another people problem. It's not a me thing. None of these things affect me. So Top of Mind, what we try to do each week, we come out once a week and we take one tough topic and we look for perspectives that are personal, people who have skin in the game, who've been affected by the issue. We look for perspectives that will surprise us and challenge us. I want everybody who listens to feel a little bit challenged, that they're going to hear a perspective that stretches them a little to think differently about the issue. So ultimately, what that does for me and what I hope it does for listeners is it leaves me feeling empowered. I mean, we are going right to the heart of these tough topics, controversial topics people feel strongly about.
Yep.
But by listening carefully, being willing to hear challenging perspectives, by leaning into the human stories and experiences, we come away feeling more empathetic and more empowered, sometimes even more optimistic. We lean into solutions if there are any that we can highlight. At the very least, I come away with a clearer understanding of the work that I need to do to kind of figure out a position on an issue or to start advocating for something that I care for, for what I care about or how I believe around that topic. So it's called Top of Mind with Julie Rose. And then we have this special conversation series where we bring people like you on to tell us about a time when you were challenged, when you had to kind of lean into the discomfort of a challenging idea or perspective. And your reinvention story fits right in. So I really enjoyed talking with you about that on the show too. People can actually check it out. It just recently dropped on our podcast feed. So look for Top of Mind with Julie Rose, and Karen's face will be right there near the top of the feed.
Oh yeah, that was so much fun. I love getting out there and sharing the story because I know there's so many people who can relate to it. And I'm sure there's so many people today that heard your story and could relate to an aspect of it. So thank you. I always want to give guests the last word. So let me know if you could say one thing to the women who are listening. They know they want to make a change, but they don't know how to get started. What would you tell them?
I think we've already mentioned it. It's, find what lights you up and build your change around that. I think it's always going to be less successful if you're changing to get away from something rather than changing into something that really excites you.
1,000%. Amazing. Julie, where can people find you beside the podcast? Is there anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, sure. You can look for Top of Mind Pod on all the platforms, or look for Julie Rose. There's a lot of us out there, but you'll find me I'm on Instagram, Facebook, with public profiles, Twitter a little bit, sometimes X, whatever you call it.
I know.
But really the place to reach me is just through our podcast. Our email address is right there. And that just look for Top of Mind with Julie Rose on all the podcast places.
Awesome. Make sure you go check out the show. And thank you all for being here again today. And until next time, stay fabulous. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're inspired to take action by committing to one of the tips or strategies we talked about in today's episode. And if you want accountability and support, I've got your back. Join my private Facebook group, Successful Working Women Rocking Reinvention, today. You'll find a community of like-minded women waiting to support you, exclusive content, and helpful resources to ensure you succeed. Lastly, if you loved this episode, do me a favor and be sure to leave a review. Together, we can encourage more women to live their purpose. See you next time.